Assessing learning in the remote delivery environment. What are the ways that we have at our disposal in this remote delivery environment to assess, to get feedback on, to understand more about the progress and about the attainment of the learners that are in front of us, and not in front of us in a face-to-face environment necessarily, but in front of us online. So that's the topic, that's what we'll be looking at this afternoon. Please enjoy the session. Please use the question and answer box to forward your comments and questions. And I'm going to hand over now to our dear colleague, Hala, the assessment of learning.
Thanks very much, John, and welcome everybody to our 8th webinar. We're so happy you're still with us till the end of this series, and we're looking forward to meeting you all in the next cycle for another new series of the Ask Hala webinars. Let's start right away. Just to remind you that we've covered these topics throughout the series. Synchronous platforms, social media, asynchronous platforms, then the blended approach. We also covered motivation, how to design and select materials. We also talked about how to work with parents and involve them. And today we're going to focus on assessment. My colleague Timar will be posting a link now to Mentimeter. It's a poll to let us know where you're joining us from. So please, when Timar posts the link in the Q&A box, please respond with the country you're joining us from now. In today's webinar, we're going to cover some points. We're going to expose you to some key concepts of assessment. Many of you are already aware of them. We're going to compare very quickly and very lightly between formative and summative assessment, but with a focus on formative assessment as our survival tool during the time of pandemic. We're going also to tap upon the difference between criteria and rubrics as two main concepts of assessment. We'll give some ideas for self-assessment. We'll talk about giving feedback and what effective feedback should look like. And we'll end the session by talking about cheating and academic honesty because it has been a burning issue. Whenever we talk about remote assessment, teachers come up with this question: what if students cheat simply because they're away? We cannot monitor them. Just a quick reference to our continuous professional development framework for teachers, designed and developed by the British Council. And, you know, this sets the reference and the base actually for everything we do in our professional development programs. And for those who are joining us for the first time today, the Teachers CPD Framework has got 12 professional practices or 12 pillars for your professional development. And today we're going to focus and shed some light on one of them, which is assessing learning. Let me ask you a question and see how you're going to respond to this through the Q&A box. It's been almost a year now with the schools closed, then opened, then closed, and semi-open, semi-closed. So how have you been assessing your learners' progress so far? Since last March, let's say, March, April. How have you been assessing your learners' progress so far? Was it a painful experience for you? Was it fun? Was it an opportunity? Was it a challenge? Tell us what you think. And could I ask John just to tell me what's happening in the Q&A box, because I can't see it now in my full screen mode.
I would love to be able to tell you what's happening in the Q&A box, but unfortunately, I can't see it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that's the case.
Maybe Noura can you see the Q&A box, Noura, from your side?
Yeah, but participants are still saying where are they from.
That's okay, that's all right. So again, for those who are still joining the webinar, our first question, something to stimulate your thinking to start the session with, is to tell us about how you have been assessing your learners' progress so far, with all of the opening and closing of schools and the pandemic is still going on. Describe your experience to us. Was it painful? Was it enjoyable? Was it a challenge? Do you see it as an opportunity? How do you see it? All right, I'll go on with the slides, and Noura can easily stop me and tell me about your responses from the Q&A box. Let's see what we get. Till you think about this question, I just want to share with you the results of a very short survey we've done in last May 2020, and we surveyed 100 teachers and teacher educators from our British Council Teacher Community Facebook group, and we wanted to get their thoughts on what their plans were for the end of term assessment, just to to get an idea about how they position and how they think about online assessment. And as you can see from the results on the screen, the majority by far said that they're going to depend, or they were going to depend on online assessment because most probably the exams in their countries were postponed or cancelled. That's why they resorted to online assessment. So it seems that online assessment has been the answer for this question since May. So also tell us how far have you used online assessment? If that was the popular response from the teachers back in May, how much online assessment did you use in your classes? Also tell us what you think in the Q&A box. So now, 1 year through the pandemic, what did the pandemic teach us? I'm sure you know the difference between summative or formative and formative assessment. And what if there is a key message the pandemic has delivered, what was it? There was a survey done by the UNESCO back in April, and they actually tried to capture the different responses different countries had to manage examinations and assessments during the closure of the school. And the responses of the countries were different. They either rescheduled the exams, or they postponed them, they maintained them, they moved online, or they reduced the number of exams. That was the results of the survey. Actually, 11 countries in the survey reported that they have cancelled the large-scale high-stake exams, or the end-of-term exams, or the end-of-year exams. And only very few of them, very few countries out of the 11, such as Norway and France, could provide fair and valid decisions on progression and the graduation when they used formative assessment. So imagine that 11 countries had to cancel their end-of-term exams, but they could give valid and fair evaluation of the students' performance and make decisions actually to put the students one level up, or to move them to the next year, because they depended on formative assessment, because they used this approach of assessing the students formatively. And we're going to focus more on formative assessment during the session today. First, let me show you.
Sorry, I'm just going to chip in, if I may, just to come back to your original question. I've now able to see the Q&A box. Your original question about, so what have you been doing in relation to online learning? And I think what's coming in, as many people will testify, is that it's been challenging, and comments especially for young learners in terms of how do you assess their assessments. So a couple of examples of how teachers have gone about the business of assessment through WhatsApp and Google Forms as two examples. And I think that, you know, underpinning, you know, the answer to your question is around validity and reliability. You know, these the two, you know, fundamentals of testing, that in particular has been a challenge, that maybe they've managed some assessment and learning, maybe they've used some different kinds of platforms, but getting something which is both valid and reliable, that's been part of the challenge.
Right. That's a very, very useful comment, actually, and it leads us naturally to the next point about the difference between testing and assessment. I totally agree that validity and reliability are two main features of any proper test, but only if we look at what we're doing as test or testing. So reliability and the validity are key for testing, but we need to decide when we're going to give this test, when in the year, when in the term, how are we going to assess the students through this test. And we're going to discuss today how to manage different types of tests depending on the purpose of the assessment we have in mind, how we're looking at the students' performance and learning, and what we're trying to capture exactly. Is it a value at the end in the form of a number or a grade? Or is it some insights through the improvement of their performance and the improvement of our teaching and planning as well? So stay tuned, and let me show you now a video that gives you in a minute the difference between assessment and testing.
In practice, we often use the words test and assessment interchangeably, but they do have slightly different meanings. In this video, Nuis Figueres illustrates the difference with a helpful analogy.
Students need to know what is expected from them and how they can best prepare for any assessment, and what counts and what does not count, how they're going to be assessed. And this also gives them an opportunity to learn how they are making progress. A test or an assessment, as I tell my students back home, a test is a photograph. And formative assessment and classroom assessment is, and including self-assessment, is a mirror. So you look at yourself in the mirror and you know where you are and you know what you look like. If the picture is taken and the picture is good, the picture will really have to coincide with the image that you had made of yourself.
So I'm back to my slides now, and in the video, we saw an interesting analogy showing the difference between a test or testing and assessment. In other words, formative versus summative assessment. And a test as a part of the summative assessment is like a photograph, is like a picture. It takes a snapshot of how you look like at this moment, and it's fixed, and it says something about you, whether you look good or you're not looking good, and you cannot change anything about the picture as it's taken now. Whereas formative assessment is like looking at a mirror and thinking about your appearance and thinking about yourself and evaluating your appearance and trying to find ways to adjust your hair, adjust your clothes. And so there is always a chance in while you're looking at the mirror to make changes, to think, to criticize, to change things. So that's an interesting analogy, actually. And back to the question about the challenges around reliability and validity. Again, whether we're choosing formative or summative assessment really decides on how we look at or how we define reliability and validity. Is it a high-stake test? Is it a summative test that comes at the end of something to capture achievement and to give value? Or is it an ongoing formative test to give you an idea or a diagnostic idea about how the students are progressing or learning?
If I can just leap in there, there's been some really interesting comments that have come through that I wanted to share with you and get your opinion on, and really go to the heart of what we're trying to do through this the webinar series, through this lens of looking at online assessment. Sarwa, has written about what happens next, and that that our move online won't be lost when the pandemic is finally over and we have a return to face-to-face environment. So it's been an opportunity in a sense. So learning how to assess students online by necessity has actually, in Salwa's opinion, been a great thing. And something also around the continuous nature of testing, which perhaps fits into your formative schema, that it's an ongoing process, isn't it, as teachers, that it's part of one of the things that we're trying to do to move away from teaching a program to teaching students, so getting feedback on progress, on levels, on a continuous basis, so that we can adjust what we're doing in light of that information. And one other comment as well, which is anonymous, about which was in response to I use Google Forms, or I use WhatsApp, or I use video directly. Practical examples, and that's what we've been trying to do throughout this series, to help you not only to understand the background, but also to have really practical things that you can use yourself.
Yeah, I'll start by responding to the last question, the practicality and the practical part that's coming in the session. So stay tuned. You'll get to know today a lot of practical ideas and practical tools to conduct a formative assessment in your online or remote classes. Back to Tharwat's point, which is actually very interesting and amazingly reflects our plan at the British Council and what we're trying to do, our approach and our policy post the pandemic. It's to keep integrating technology and the skills that we've developed throughout the pandemic. And if the pandemic is over, this doesn't mean that we discard and neglect the skills that we've been polishing and developing throughout this year of the pandemic. And it's a very good opportunity for you to announce that on like at the end of March, perhaps at the early of April, we're going to have an event, a large scale online event, and we'll be more than happy if you join. And it's going to focus on what's next after the pandemic and how our remote and digital delivery skills are going to be maintained after the pandemic. So try to join us to know what other people think about them. I like also the comment that highlights that assessment has got an ongoing nature, and I like the use of the word nature. It's naturally to keep assessing somebody continuously. So I like associating the word nature and the natural to assessment and ongoing assessment. I have some a little quiz for you now. A for assessment. So all of these acronyms start with A and start with assessment. But I want you to guess what A, O, L, A, F, L, A, L stand for. Please respond through the Q&A box. These are three approaches of assessment, or three types of assessment. A, O, L, A, F, L, A, L, and A is for assessment.
While the audience is doing that, I just wanted to share a comment with Hala from Nahida, who says it was a nice analogy, the mirror and the picture.
Yeah, I like it myself. A picture is static. The mirror, although the mirror itself, the object is static, but you still have choices. You still have control on your movement and on your appearance. Did we get any responses on the acronyms? Not yet.
Yes, there are many responses there.
Okay, cool. It's like I'm playing their game.
So assessment of learning, summative, assessment for learning, formative, assessment of learning, assessment objective learning, assessment for learning, assessment of learning. So
all right, so let me unveil this. As AOL is assessment of learning, good. AFL is assessment for learning. AAL, and I think this is not known to many, it's assessment as learning. Now another little quiz for you. What does each of these assessment types mean? What's assessment of learning? What's assessment for learning? What's assessment as learning? And to help you think about it, in each of them, think what are we assessing and why? That takes me to the next slide. So you've got three descriptions now, very brief descriptions of each type of the three assessments. But which is which? Which is assessment for learning, which is assessment as learning, and which is assessment of learning? Can you match the acronyms to the definitions? Did we get any responses, John or Noura?
My system is really slow, so I'm about 3 or 4 minutes behind the chat. Noura?
Nothing about this challenge. Let's wait. Maybe they are writing still or thinking. Let's give them time.
All right, let's unveil the first one. This one is the easiest to get, assessment for learning, because again, it enables teachers to use information about the students' knowledge to inform their teaching. So I collect information about my learners' knowledge and skills and strengths and weaknesses to inform my own planning and my own teaching methods. And the feedback I give based on the information I collected through the AFL or the assessment for learning is mainly to tell the students how to improve. Now we still have two approaches: assessment of learning and assessment as learning.
So I have the second one, Hala, assessment as learning.
The assessment as learning is the second one. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. It's when you involve the learners themselves in the learning process, and they monitor their own progress and they ask themselves questions, and it takes the form of self-assessment actually. And the teacher gives them feedback in this case to help them to reflect on their own learning. So unlike the first one, I reflect on my own teaching method as a teacher. In this one, the students reflect on their own learning as learners. And of course, the last one, assessment of learning, and that's the summative assessment, the thing that comes at the end of something to give evidence that the students have achieved something against agreed learning goals and the standards as well, the state standards, the school standards, the ministry standards. Let's use our magnifying glass and deep dive a little bit towards the formative assessment. So unlike the summative assessment, which evaluates the students' learning at the end of a unit of learning, or at the end of term or the end of the year, And again, it has to do with the standards, the benchmarks. So the country's policy, if you want to join high school, you need to pass this test with minimum of 60%, for example. So that's a benchmark, that's a standard, that's a summative assessment. But formative assessment is to monitor the students' learning and in the spirit of providing ongoing feedback, and it helps the instructors to improve their own teaching and the students to improve their own learning. The focus in the formative assessment is on the process. We enhance the process, we improve the process of learning. So if a learner wants to study how to use the comparative form of adjectives, for example, so we need to promote actually their own learning skills of how to develop this independently, how to find the resources, how to answer questions, how to assess on performance or on level. So we focus on the process as it builds, not only on the product. The purpose again is to improve. In the formative assessment is to improve the learner's learning, but the purpose in the summative assessment is to just give a value to a student's achievement, 90% or 60% or pass A or pass B. You know, it's giving a value, a number, a grade. In the formative assessment, we make sure that we evaluate chunks of content, chunks of learning, because it's ongoing, because it's formative, because it's constructive, it builds as it goes. But in the summative process, we give value after the completion of a whole unit of learning, after a chapter, after a unit, after a term, after a course. We look at learning in the formative assessment as a process, as a journey. It develops, it has its ups and downs, it has its setbacks, and that's absolutely natural and normal and acceptable and expected. But we look at the summative assessment as a product, an end product, a final thing at the end. It can take, the formative assessment, it can take the format of observations, quizzes, assignments, feedback, and the others. And it can happen synchronously and asynchronously, and we'll show you some examples in a minute. And we think of formative assessment based on the UNESCO survey, based on our personal experience throughout the pandemic, as a tool of sustainability and a safety net. So instead of depending or waiting till a big test to happen at the end, keep doing formative assessment just to sustain your teachings and sustain your decision also of passing or failing a learner. Throughout a sustainable formative approach, you'll be able to form a learner profile at the end. So their passing or their failing doesn't depend on one single test. It depends on an entire journey of learning that you're completely aware of and you have a track of. So it's a safety net and it's a tool of sustainability. Another quiz for you, a little question for you. So look at this chart, this assessment related chart on the screen, and think about the two arrows, the red arrow, the horizontal arrow, and the purple arrow, the vertical arrow, and tell me in the Q&A box which refers to criteria and which refers to rubrics. Criteria, red or purple, rubrics, red or purple. Noura will tell me.
Hala, while waiting for the teachers to answer, there are two comments. One of them is about students not being responsible in an online assessment. The second one is how to make sure that the work that the students are doing, for example, a test is their work, not somebody else's work. How to make sure that it's their work.
That's a good thing, and one of the sessions aims today is to discuss cheating and academic honesty. So if we're going with remote assessment, how to make sure it's their original work and they're not cheating simply, or they're not using somebody else's work. We're going to come to this point later.
Great. So I have the answers. Red is the criteria.
Please. Yeah.
Rubric. Some mentioned that red is the rubric. Others mentioned that the purple stands for rubrics.
Well, yes, red is for the criteria and the purple is for the rubrics. So task achievement, cohesion and coherence, accuracy, range, these are the criteria we use to assess any piece of work, especially speaking and writing. And please make sure you communicate those criteria to the students. Okay, tell them that I'm going to evaluate your work in terms of 4 areas. Task achievement, I'm going to look at your task achievement. If you're responding to the task, I'm going to look at how cohesive and coherent your work is. I'm going to look at the accuracy, and I'm going to look at the range of vocabulary you're using. And the purple arrow refers to the rubrics. The rubrics, like the grades or the metrics you're going to position the students' work at. So when do you give them a 2? When do you give them a 4? Or do you give them an A? And when to give them a C or D? So rubrics is like the grades. Criteria is like the areas you're going to evaluate them in. So rubrics actually can take many forms. They can be holistic and they can be analytic. And you've got 2 shapes or 2 figures on the screen, A and B. Can you tell us which one is holistic and which one is analytic? So you can see two assessment tools on the screen. One of them is using a holistic approach and one of them is using an analytic approach. Actually, this has to do with the rubrics.
I have answer here.
Yes,
from
Noor?
one of participants. B, holistic, A, analytic.
That's correct. B is holistic because, as you can see, there are no descriptions, there are no details what great means, what good and not so good mean. It's just, you know, it's a holistic impression of the learner's work, and you tick. So I think given a specific criterion, I think this student's work is good. Given a specific criterion, I think this student's work is great. Then you give a holistic overall grade B+, let's say. In figure A, this is very analytic. There is a description, what we call descriptors for each rubric under each criterion. So there is some details to tell you when to give them, when and why to give them 5 and not 4, for example. Rubrics also could be numeric, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you just evaluate them, giving them 1 or 2 or 3, 4. 1 is the weakest, 4 is the strongest, and it could be pictorial. It could take the form of pictures. And I like this one, the one you can see on the screen. So instead of just giving them 1, 2, 3, 4, associate the numbers to pictures or building a burger sandwich. So 1 is just the base bread, 2, you've got some meat here, 3, it's a bland meat on bread, but 4 is a cheese burger sandwich with lettuce and tomatoes. It's the best. Can we use emojis and other pictures in the rubrics? Yes, you can. Why not? So you can have a range of emojis, especially if you're trying to get how the students feel about the lesson or how they feel about their understanding. And actually you can combine the emojis or the pictures with the numbers, and you can also combine that with some labels or brief descriptions like need some work, great, excellent, okay. It could be anything as long as it's systematic, consistent, and well communicated to the students. Please don't keep this to yourself. After you design your criteria and rubrics, communicate it and make it known and visible to the students. They need to know what you're going to evaluate them on. We have a list of recommended tools for you to use for your remote or online assessment. If you're working in a low resource context, you can use WhatsApp to send questions and receive answers. They can respond to you through emojis, text, or even voice messages. And you can give them feedback the same way. You can use Facebook Lite, and Facebook has got the option of polls, and through the polls you can assess them. You can use the voice recording option in WhatsApp, as I mentioned, and you can also share the Google Docs. It doesn't require the strong internet connection. It's one Google document where everybody has got access to them. They can respond to your task, then you can add comments on their performance, on their writing. And the Google Documents now these days have got the option of giving voice feedback. So instead of writing feedback in boxes or in comments, you can also give them voice feedback. Poll Everywhere, which is going to be my tool for today to show you how we use it for assessment. Mentimeter, and it's the poll that you took at the beginning of the webinar, and you're used to it now. We use it every webinar, and it has a range of options. It has a range of question types you can use from. It's not only the poll we use in the session, but it has different types of question. If you're working in a high resource context where you have good sustained internet connection, you can use Google Forms to design complete tests. Kahoot, which is gamified and the game-based tool. Quizzes, also if you want to add this touch of competition, it's all about competitions and games. Quizlet, especially for flashcards and testing vocabulary, again its definition. Padlet, which is good for collaboration. It's one space, everybody comes, they find your assignment, they respond to your task or your question, they leave each other comments, you go and leave them comments. But this is not good for if you've got shy students or students who feel intimidated when they receive feedback in public. You need to resort to a private chat where you communicate feedback, because Padlet is public. Everybody can see everybody else's work. Vocaroo is a platform where you give feedback in the format of voice, and it's stored there, and they can listen to different feedback in a voice format, in MP3 file format. And Formative is a complete platform where you even can construct or build online portfolios for the students to compile a range of evidence of their success or their progress. I'll show you now a practical example of how to use Poll Everywhere for assessment, and I'm going to show you a poll that I designed for a group of teachers that I was working with. And Timur, can you share the link in the chat box, please, in the Q&A box, so they can vote for the poll? While Timur is sharing the link, I'm going to show you the platform from inside and briefly tell you how to construct or build an assessment there. So this is Poll Everywhere from inside. You can sign up with your Gmail account, it's fine. And under activities here, it tells you if you'd like to design a new activity, and it gives you all of these options if you want to design an activity or an assessment. It could be MCQ, multiple choice. It could be the word cloud. You get the responses and the answers from the learners in the format of a word cloud. It could be thumbs up, thumbs down, like yes, no questions. It could be a survey. It could be an open-ended question assessment, and it could take the format of a competition. Now I'm going to show you the activity, the poll I'm sharing with you now. I hope Timur has shared it already, and I'm going to activate it so you can respond to the poll. I'm going to activate it. I activated it now.
Timur has already
posted it. Okay, all right, okay, just in case. And let's go back to the poll results now. Okay, we started to receive responses to the questions, and I used the questions in the format of find someone who activity. So instead of asking direct questions to the participants, in my case they were teachers. In your case they could be teachers or learners. So I used to find someone who, rather than asking very straightforward questions. And question 1, for example, who uses pair work and group work? Second question is, who has never conducted a debate with their learners, and so on. So you can see, so here on the front screen, you can see how many people are taking the survey. In my case, 14 are taking the survey now, or the quiz. And for this question around debates, 33 said yes, 67 yes said no, and it's changing because they're still responding to the questions. Still responding to this question too. Yeah, we're still getting answers. So that's the idea. So you design a set of questions. And here you can see the progress of your class. So I have 19 now taking the quiz, and the green bars actually show how far they are through the quiz. So you can see that most of them are about to finish. Only 6 people are still doing the quiz, and you have the answers here. So that's one example of how to conduct synchronous assessment during your synchronous live lesson or your live session, and you get the answers instantly with feedback, as you can see. Other tools which you can do the same work are quizzes, for example. But let me share again. And
thank you, Hala. Paul everywhere answers one of the questions from one of the participants, which is good. Thank you.
Good, nice. And I was saying that one of the good things about quizzes, which doesn't exist in Poll Everywhere, that in quizzes you have a report for free on how many answers one participant got right or wrong. So you have detailed report of right and wrong answers for individual learners, and it's for free. In Poll Everywhere, it's there, but you need to upgrade your account. You need to pay tiny amount of money to upgrade your account. Let's move on with our slides, and I'll take you now to the self-assessment for remote and online teaching. We talked about formative assessment, and actually one of the key elements of formative assessment, or something we're trying to associate with formative assessment, is self-assessment. And I'll show you now some practical examples to get the students to self-assess their own learning and performance, and online and remotely. So the first one is the traffic lights. You can ask them, first you can showcase yourself first. So you can ask them to get 3 different colors of or 3 different cards, different colors, 1 red, 1 yellow, and 1 green. If they don't have cards, they can color small pieces of paper. They can use blue tack, they can use Play-Doh, they can use just markers, anything. And at the end of your lesson, you can ask them, you can give them their exit ticket, and their exit ticket is to tell you how they feel about today's lesson. And you can ask them if they feel okay about today's lesson, if they understand how to use present simple to talk about their daily routines, they need to raise the green card. If they know how to use present simple to talk about their daily routines, but they need more practice, they need more example, they can raise the yellow card. And if they don't understand, they don't know how to use the present simple to talk about daily routine, they use the red cards. So 3 cards, green for confidence, I understand, I can do it, I feel good. Yellow for I'm okay, but I need more support, please. Red, that's oh, I'm in trouble, I don't understand anything. So that's one thing you can do. If they don't have cards, you can have an interactive online whiteboard. I'll give you an example of this in a minute. Then you can ask them to go to the interactive whiteboard where everybody can see it, where everybody exists on it, and they can draw a square and they can color it themselves. So they draw a square, then they use the fill button and they can color their own square on the spot, live, synchronously. Another way of getting them to assess themselves is to use non-verbal responses, like physical responses. Ask them to open the cameras if they can and if they are okay with it, and give you the thumbs up or thumbs down as a response of thumb. This is true, this is false, or I'm okay, I'm not okay. Or they can give you the response in numbers, like how many goats the wolf has eaten. 3, 2, 1. So they can do this, or they can use the non-verbal reaction on a platform like Zoom, for example. They have the thumbs up, thumbs down. They can even use the mini whiteboards, which could be an A4 inserted inside a plastic file or a plastic wallet, and they can use a board marker to write their answers on it, and they can wipe the marker and they can use it again. So ask them what's the opposite of tall. They write short on this A4, then they put it up in front of the screen. All right. Another self-assessment tool that's I really recommend, and it's a very nice tool. It's the Cambridge English Write and Improve, and Timur is going to post the link in the Q&A box in a minute. Till Timur does this, I'll take you to the tool itself and see how it works. Let me share my browser again. So I chose here on my left hand, I chose my level, beginner, okay. And I chose the writing task I want to test myself against. The writing task is like this. Some people sleep in a dark and quiet room. Other people sleep with a small light on and don't mind the noise. How do you like to sleep? Explain your answer. And I put my answer in the box here. Okay. And let me add something to my answer so that I get different feedback this time. Let me say, I hate birds when they sing in the morning. That's not true. I'm just making it up. Then after I added my text as a response to the task, I'll click check. It says here check again because I've done the activity 2 times before. Okay, so I'll click check. Then the tool will process my answer. See this bar? This bar means it's still processed, being processed now. And voila, on your right hand, you get the feedback. It says, good try. Read your writing again and study the feedback. Okay, and it gives me a grade from 0 to 5, and it says here 5 is best. Also, it highlights the areas, the strong areas in my writing. So it highlights here. There is a lot of noise out there. Birds are also singing so loudly because my sentences are compound, are complex. It highlighted it as a strong point in my writing, and it gives you a chart of how my writing is progressing. So my first attempt was A1. My second attempt was between A1 and A2. My third attempt is towards A2, higher than the first one. And there is a timer so you can control your time. I hope Timur has posted this link in the Q&A box. He did. Okay, good. Now back to the slides. It's about feedback and the learner's agency. Why do you want to give learners feedback, especially in isolation, especially if we're teaching remotely? Your feedback has to be effective, and effective feedback actually improves the persons themselves, not just the work. So imagine after the session, John tells me that the session was wonderful, Hala. Okay, that's a scenario 1. Scenario 2, John tells me the session was wonderful and your ways of delivering it were really amazing. 2 different scenarios. The second one is more effective because it talks about me, not only about the work I do, right? So effective feedback should include the person as a whole, not only the product, the work I produce. And through feedback, you can develop a growth mindset, a mindset that accepts criticism and accepts improvement. This is how people grow. Again, in the feedback, when we give the feedback, we focus on the learning journey, the learning process, not the end product. So John sometimes tells me, oh, you've improved in designing blah, blah. Or I think, Hala, you got the idea of combining this and that. So he focuses on my journey as a learner, not only on this particular PowerPoint presentation, not on this product. It's on what happens behind the scenes before this product. Also, through feedback, we can ensure longevity. It's not only well done on today's lesson, I'm so proud of you, you can use present simple to talk about your daily routine. It's also about where and when else this lesson might help you. It may help you in writing a personal statement to apply for a scholarship. It might help you writing a cover letter to apply for a job. So it's not only now and today, it's about where else and when else your success today can contribute to your general improvement and general growth. The metacognition, or thinking about your own learning, or the learner training, or learn how to learn. All of these are the same thing. They refer to the same thing. They refer to thinking about your own learning, thinking and talking and be an advocate of your own learning. It's not just thinking about this mechanical test. It's thinking about, have I prepared myself well for the test? Have I spent the 2 days before the test well to prepare myself for the test? It's not about my performance today, it's about what happened the 2 days before the test. And This is a quote I really like. It's from John Hattie, The Visible Learning for Teachers, Maximizing Impact on Learning. The most important feedback is that which pupils provide to their teacher and not the other way around. Don't forget that feedback has two ways: teacher to learner, and more importantly, learner to teacher.
You raised
yes,
really,
John.
really interesting points there about learner agency, and again, I think it's key to what we're trying to do through this series, but through the Teacher Networking Initiative in general. We're trying to encourage learners to self-assess, to reflect, to think about their progress. We're trying to encourage teachers to create an environment for their learners where self-assessment, where learners have a stake in their learning and therefore a stake in their future.
Yeah.
That's the kind of environment that we support teachers to create. And in terms of teachers themselves, their own professional development through peer-to-peer collaboration, through collaborative learning, we're trying to support teachers who have a stake in their professional development. You gave a list of resources and picked on a couple of examples there to illustrate how these different resources can be used for online assessment. And I can see in the comments suggestions like Grammarly, for example, coming in. And that idea of teachers themselves saying, well, I've used this is good, what about that? That agency, the importance of that, what you've, I think, just shown us that it's important for learners in terms of self-assessment, in terms of them taking responsibility for their own learning. But as we can see from the comments that are coming in, it's so important for teachers also to be part of that process of taking more responsibility for their learning and learning through sharing, not waiting for opportunities to come, but to give feedback, to give to others, the fellow teachers, ideas, experiences, and sharing in general. So agency is a key term.
Yes, I like the way you throw the shadow of this on teachers' professional development, and it's the same principle applies: agency, taking ownership and responsibility of your own learning. For the sake of time, I'm not going to play this video because it's in the resources list anyways, and it shows you 6 effective ways of giving feedback. We're going to share this through the resources, so I'm going to skip this part. And again, giving feedback, there are 2 nice Facebook Live Q&A sessions that we did through our Facebook Global Front Teaching English British Council. And in one of them, there was a reference to what we call the burger sandwich feedback. So we start with something positive. That's different from the burger sandwich in the rubric. I don't know why I'm referring too much today to burger, but it's always nice to look at burgers and eat them. But giving feedback one of the protocols is to follow the sandwich feedback. You start with something positive, then you give a hint towards something that needs development, then you end with something positive. Please end with something positive, because this is what sticks in their mind. There is also another good advice from Christine, our dear colleague, and another live Facebook Q&A. She recommends using the chat box for privacy. Again, remember my comment about students feeling intimidated by sharing their answers in front of their classmates. Encourage them to share their answers through the chat box privately for you through a Zoom session or something. or get them to collaborate together on a Google Doc or on an online interactive whiteboard. And the example I'd like to give you today for free online whiteboard is board, AWW board. Okay, you can see that on the screen, or you can use Padlet for collaboration, of course, for collaborative feedback. And I referred to how to use Padlet earlier for collaborative feedback. Now, the long-awaited item on cheating and academic honesty. I think the best policy to counter cheating and the lack of academic honesty is to build the trust. We need to acknowledge, first of all, that there is no foolproof, there is no ultimate solution for us as academics and educators to stop completely cheating or to prevent cheating completely. That's not going to happen, and I don't have a magic stick to tell you that, okay, when we do online assessment, I guarantee zero cheating. That's impossible. Let's accept that and let's embrace that. But we need to educate learners about academic honesty, and we can have lessons, actually stand-alone lessons on academic honesty and how cheating is harmful and is not taking them anywhere. And actually, if there is a problem with them to understand why cheating is harmful and not acceptable, this is perhaps because we haven't intentionally educated them on it. We haven't told them explicitly about it. So if they think cheating is okay, maybe because you haven't told them that cheating is not okay and academic honesty is really advised. And instead of following a deficit-based approach, trying to find mistakes and trying to police the process and trying to corner them, like, oh yes, okay, I caught you up cheating. I know you're copying from the internet. That's bad. I'm clever because I found out that. Let's not do that. And alternatively, let's promote an asset-based approach. We trust them to do the right thing because we're educating them on that. And let's engage them in teachable moments around academic honesty. Again, you can give them sessions on academic honesty and how this contributes to their own learning and their own flourishment. There is another Facebook session around Q&A session around assessment, and one of the questions that we received live was around cheating, and I suggested using this tool. It's called Turnitin, and there is another tool also that can do the same work. It's called Plagiarism Detector. It's an online tool for free. You can just copy and paste the student's work. Copy the student's work and paste it inside the tool, and the tool will tell you how much of the work is plagiarized or copied from the internet. So you've got two examples on the screen now. One example is 49% plagiarized or copied from the internet, and the tool could establish reference to the sources they copied from, and that's not acceptable. 49% is high. And another example of 2% copied, and that's okay. And usually the 2% is like fixed phrases or, you know, phrases that everybody use. That's the end of my session today, and these are some useful resources, articles from Edutopia on summative versus formative assessment in distance learning, Facebook Live from our Global Teaching English Facebook page, another compilation of tools from Teaching English blog on digital tools to give feedback, and Write and Improve, the Cambridge English tool. And there is another website I'd like you to check. It's English Teaching 101, and it has a list of digital tools for formative assessment. And we covered a number of them today. So we tried to cover this. I hope we did. That's all. Thank you very much.
Hala, thank you so much for that. Can we just hang on to you for a couple of minutes longer?
Sure.
Because there've been some very interesting comments coming in, and I think one in particular from Rania, who talks about the environment in which we give feedback, and that low threat environment. And I think exams, of course, are really important. Marks and grades are really important. But ultimately, what we're trying to do as teachers of English is to help our learners help themselves. So by cheating, for example, on a test, that's not going to help you to be able to communicate in English in a real world situation. So the kinds of training, if you like, the kind of devoting lessons to that fundamental aim and the environment in which learners themselves think, yeah, I'm just cheating myself if I'm cheating on the test. That's not a naive comment, it seems to me. That, yeah, I think is at the heart of what we're trying to do. And I think in terms of teacher development as well, that the idea behind the communities of practice is, as Rania says, it's about creating an environment in which people can say openly and honestly, you know, this was good, but have you thought about doing this? An environment in the classroom where learners and teachers are able to say in an open and honest environment, yes, I enjoyed that, but I'd rather do a bit more of that. Your English is good, but your pronunciation could do with a bit of improvement. So as human beings, as teachers, as learners, that I think has to be the other part of the agency that you were talking about, which is the environment in which that agency can flourish. And part of the mechanism for ensuring that is, I think, as you said, absolutely correct, the asset-based approach. I'm not more clever because I've caught you out. I'm more clever because I've helped you to understand that cheating isn't ultimately going to help you get better at English. Thank you so much, Hala. You said about feedback, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody else did. One of the questions that came out today was about how do you assess kindergarten students in online area, and I think it's a good way into what I think is what we'll conclude with, which is our program for the next cycle.
Yes.
Topics such as how to help young learners in particular. We've taken advice from all the comments that we've received, and we're going to be putting together the program soon for the next cycle. And the event that you spoke about that we'll run just before Ramadan, the second week of April, will be an opportunity for us to say, okay, so these are the areas that we think are now most important for teachers, and we'll give an opportunity for the teachers that regularly attend to say, well, yeah, actually those 5 are good, but those 2, they're not so important for us right now. So the next cycle in the Ask Hala webinar series will, in a sense, reinforce the message that we're trying to get across, that collaborative learning, that deciding together on the content of what we engage with as teachers or as learners, that is something that we work out through negotiation. So thank you very much, Hala. Thank you very much, Dema. Thank you very much, Nora. And thank you, of course, to all of you who've joined us today. Watch this space. The announcement for the next webinar, its topics, etc., will be coming very shortly. So enjoy, if it's the beginning of your weekend now, enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you again in this space very soon. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.